Hey everybody, Coach Sal here with episode 9 of the Thinking Body Revival. Today, we're going to talk about some concepts rather than some specific books or works by authors or experts. There's two things that have been on my mind a lot since I started doing this show. One thing is the concept of timeline superiority, and we'll discuss that, and also how it relates to the concept of fragility and anti-fragility, or being fragile and being anti-fragile, which is a thought put forth by Nassim Taleb, and in really he applies it to the business world. These complex structures that cannot withstand any kind of disruption and how they fall apart. So we're going to talk about that, and we talk about some real world examples of that. I have one of my favorite books here today. You'll see that 10-minute exercises for busy men. That is late 1800s publication. I'll have some of those excerpts as well in my Patreon as we go forward. But again, that's some old school stuff. That's awesome to see, and it still works today. We're going to talk about some more modern concepts that have come about, really looking at our situation and what we can do to fix it. All right, so we're going to flip that clock and get to it. All right, everybody. So there's two concepts I want everyone to kind of be familiar with, and I'm going to go into this going forward, or going into this today, because we're going to talk about it going forward. The first concept I mentioned is timeline superiority, and that's basically my feeling, and others believe it too, but that because we are here on the timeline, we are somehow automatically superior to everything and everyone that's come before us. And clearly that hasn't been the case through history, or else empires wouldn't fall. I think we touched upon that. I know I touched upon it in my podcast on Real Voices of the Game Network. The idea that somehow everything today is superior to everything from yesterday because it's today, and progress, the progression of time, means that we're better, is clearly not the case. And I'll talk about two obvious things: our general overall health and well-being. First of all, certainly not better off than it was 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and so on. As we've been discussing, we've had a erosion of our health and well-being that started, post World War II, and drips and drabs has gotten worse and worse and worse till we're at the point today where at least 20% of our kids are obese, type 2 diabetes for everybody, which is ridiculous, which is really a disease of convenience and abundance, heart disease and cancers. And all of these things were supposed to be better. And with the medications that we have on hand and the supposed treatments we have on hand, things have gotten worse. We can look at our educational system. We've spent more money on education and we have worse outcomes. We have spent more money on healthcare and we have worse outcomes. People are dying younger. I talked about it on other shows. We have a higher maternity mortality rate and we have a higher infant mortality rate than other industrialized countries that are at our economic level. We are actually at the bottom of the list of the countries that are the most advanced. So right there are two stark examples of how we're worse off. That trend extends to sport. And this is an argument that's been going on for years about Major League Baseball and baseball in general, but Tommy John surgeries have exploded and have gotten worse every year. More pitchers are on the injured list. And it's not just at the major league level. It goes down into the high school level. Kids younger than ever are suffering these injuries. We're not better off today simply by virtue of the fact that we're here. And my message, which started the last couple of weeks, talking about the La Sierra workout program, which was a phys ed program, we featured it in episode 8, and the JFK memo, or the JFK article that he posted or published in Sports Illustrated in 1960 about the soft American, which recognized this trend that Eisenhower brought to everyone's attention when he was president in the 50s, in the time of the Korean War. We've had this slow erosion, and we were doing things better then than we are now, but we have to go back and look at those things that were working back then and see where these modern contrivances, whether it's technology, whether it's changes to our diet, whether it's obviously the fact that we're more sedentary, we have to get back to doing things that can allow us to overcome the inevitable progress of society. Now, this concept of fragile versus anti-fragile, again, Nassim Taleb has brought this up, and he's written several books and lectured on this subject, that we have such complex systems that they cannot withstand, or they cannot stand any kind of disruption, because the more complex they become, the more prone they are to disruption from outside forces. Using Major League Baseball as the perfect example, using our healthcare system as the perfect example, the system is producing worse outcomes. The system that's in place in baseball, which needs to prepare its players for the rigors of the game, which is itself the disruption that we're talking about. Players are getting injured during doing basic things: throwing, running, swinging bats. The system in place to prepare them for that is not working. Again, the injury rate is showing you that the system doesn't work. Healthcare system we have, the more intricate it gets, the more prone it is to failure, and we see that failure every day. Our entire health and welfare system has failed us. Why we have these horrendous statistics as far as longevity and mortality rates and disease rates across the board. We have a bunch of things here at play, and we're trying to tie those together and come up with a solution that relies a lot on what we did in the past, and knowing what we've done in these ensuing years that have made things worse, we can change course and make things better. The big problem with that is people have to admit they were wrong. Some people have to admit they were wrong. People in power usually don't want to do that. I did things if I've been doing this for 35 years, the first 10 years, I was blindly following what the industry line was. And then little by little, every day you learn something new that's counter to the prevailing wisdom, and you have to change courses, and you have to admit to it. I've admitted to it. The clients who I have had all this time know it, and we've talked about it. We talk about it all the time, because there's always new information. There's always feedback we get from each other, from our workouts, from our successes and failures, that we can use to improve us and improve ourselves going forward. All right, so in the next segment, we're going to do a little bit of a movement demonstration that is designed to reclaim some of our lost function. A little suspense. Stay tuned. Hey everyone. So one of my favorite movements that I've learned late in life, that I've come to discover late in life, is called the deep squat. A deep squat is nothing more than getting down all the way, feet flat, your butt to your calves, butt to your heels. Problem is, from years of abuse, misuse, injury, some things too late to totally change, I can't. Most of us can't. And I'll go into that a little more in detail. But the deep squat, and this is what I need to do. I have a pair of 2.5 kilogram plates that I keep in my area where I stand when I train people. And in between, I get myself down. Rather than sit, this becomes a much more relaxing position. And as my hip injury got worse, which ultimately led to the replacement, it was harder and harder for me to do this free form, or freestanding, as I will say, which is this, with no holding on. However, I do have my heels up, and I'm going to show you a progression to get through so you could do this and really make use of it. I'm getting to the point now, it's a year from my hip replacement, where my posture now is better than it's ever been, because I'm able to totally get down on this side. And my shoulder range, which has never been great, is getting better. And you'll find that as you try to get your arms up overhead, your low back and your shoulder mobility is as much of an issue as your hip mobility. I do that a lot. I train my young athletes, all my kids that I have, whether they were my sons, athletes, your sons, your daughters, your kids, your athletes on your teams. Any kid should get to the point where, even if they can't do the full deep squat with their feet flat, will be able to do that as long as you spend time on it. I recommend all the coaches out there or parents who are involved with their kids' fitness, get them into these positions so that they can make the best use of their entire body and their movement ability. Their movement ability will improve the more they get into those positions, as a stretch really does relax you and it loosens you up like nothing else. So even if you do have a hard time with the heels up, what I recommend is you get a dumbbell or you set yourself up so you have something to hold. I like the dumbbell because it teaches you to be somewhat freestanding. This will help you down. And then once you get down there, after a little while, you might find, hey, you know what? I can feel myself loosening up and I can let go. And then if you feel like you need to get a little stability, sometimes all you need is that 15 pounds worth of leverage or whatever you would say that is to get yourself going. The more I'm sitting here, even though like I'm usually pretty loose here, I actually always feel this. And it's not a stress or strain at all. I think you could tell from my breathing and my overall attitude, I'm pretty good here, and it's really a great position to be in. The more you can do it, the better you are. I try to do that for like 30 seconds in between my rest periods. Like if I'm going to have a 2-minute rest period between things in the gym, at least 10 times during that workout, I'm going to take 10 30-second periods and be in that deep squat. And if you can do it with your feet flat, that's even better. However, I'm going to show you another step of the progression next, so hang on. All right, so now I'm going to show you a couple of other things you could do in this progression to be proficient in the deep squat, and you get a little bit of a look at the back recesses of my facility. So I have the squat rack, which is very useful for things that you might not even consider, like such a move as this deep squat progression. What I try to do is get my feet close together as I would be there, because I feel if you get too wide, you wind up moving in a way that doesn't give you the true benefit. I like to have my feet closer, especially here that I'm holding on. And what you do is you ease yourself down into the position and you try to have as good a posture as you can. And the longer you start getting into this position, you will start to feel your hips loosen up and you could get this side to side sway, which is just a really great stretch. And I also make use of the rounded back, right? Round your back so you can just let your shoulders go, and you'll feel this in a completely different area. But then you always want to pull back up and have that good posture and fix your feet so you feel like you're really pushing in to the ground with your flat feet. And then the next thing you could do is you do a deep squat with the holding on, which allows you to work through this range. So what I try to tell people to do is get your hands on and hold through a couple of reps, right? So you have your hands pretty much in contact with that bar. And then what you're trying to do is not hold on at all and see where you can go. Again, this has been a constant struggle for me. And we'll talk about the areas that it affects it as we go. But I just want to show you a couple of the ways and a couple of the things you can do. You could widen your feet a little bit, try to get all the way down and hold on for as little as possible, which is going to get your body used to getting into that deep squat position. All right, so when we come back, we're going to wrap this all up and I'll give you some more ideas for how you can get into this position and why this position is so important. The deep squat is phenomenal. Another thing I didn't get to, but it's the summer, if you get to the beach or if you're lucky enough to live someplace where you're always able to get to the beach is a great place to work on your deep squat. The sand allows you to dig your feet in, adjust your feet as you need be. Think about how I had my heels up on the plate. You get your heels higher than your balls of your feet and you sit down at the beach, get into that deep squat. I do that when I get to the beach. I'm spending so much time in that position and I feel great afterward. Your hips feel better, your low back feels better. A little story about that deep squat. Back in the days of World War I, the sniper position, and I have a picture of this that I'm going to pull out and get included here. You'll be able to see it. The sniper position was just that. It was the deep squat, feet relatively close together, butt to the ground, and they would hold the sniper rifle. And as our sedentary lifestyles caught up with us even as early as pre-World War II. The sniper position became the prone position on your belly that we've all become familiar with seeing in movies over the years. And when you look at little kids all could do that deep squat. We all probably all have pictures of our kids in that deep squat position playing with a toy, feet flat on the ground, butt down almost to the ground, and whatever they're doing, and it's effortless. We lose that. We have lost that function over time. So where does this all tie in? How does this all tie into my concepts of timeline superiority and fragility? Well, right there, we have an example of timeline superiority being the wrong way to think, because now we're at a point where we can't do something so simple. We lost the ability to do something that was second nature 70, 80 years ago. Over time, we've eroded that ability. We've lost that ability. Now we have kids who are born and they have that ability. And by the time they get into, I'm going to say, when I see kids who are as young as 12, 13 years old, they can't come close to that position. So it's something about what we're doing to our kids and what we're doing to the rest of us as society at large that we can't get into those positions anymore. Fragile versus anti-fragile comes in. We've come up with these workouts that are all based in machines, which do the stabilizing for us, balance for us, provide us with leverage, let us sit when we're doing these exercises. We've removed all of the three-dimensional elements that come into play when you move. Contending with gravity, contending with balance, providing your own stability instead of a machine providing it for you, which is what's happened, which has produced fragile individuals. You take a large group of kids from your traditional training, who have been exposed to your traditional training methods, or take a coach who has trained them in the bench press and the squat and the deadlift and the heavy overhead lift and the seated row and the pull downs, and you get them out on a field and say, I want you to hit all the areas of necessity with your team with no equipment or with simple equipment like we've seen in the booklet we featured weeks ago, the recreative physical exercises and activities, medicine balls, Indian clubs, a stick, some rope, how to do a tug of war, how to create quickness and spontaneity of movement and thought without this highly structured environment. You can't. So there you have a great example of, you have this highly structured environment, all this equipment, all of this standardized, written out programming that has to be followed, and you have to do exactly this of that and exactly this of that and so on and so forth. And it's produced athletes that are less capable. It's produced kids who are less capable. Our phys ed program, obviously, which, if there is even a phys ed program, needs to be totally rethought. And what's happened over time, we've become more reliant on these gadgets, on the wearable tech. That, look at the advent of wearable tech. Health and fitness hasn't improved since that has become now that everybody has an iWatch or these other devices that you wear, or Apple Watch that you wear, and tells you how you slept and how many steps you had and how many calories you consumed and all that nonsense, and no one's getting better from it. And the people who are already following a regimen, it's not going to make a hill of beans a difference. It doesn't matter. I don't need to know that. I know if I can or can't get into the deep squat. It doesn't matter what your watch says. So we have this system where now we're becoming more fragile because we're depending more on these systems, and they're getting more complex instead of getting simpler. Instead of getting back to that La Sierra phys ed program where they had climbing ropes and pegboards and jump rope and a handful of very rudimentary kinds of equipment where you're then moving and running and working as the body is meant to work in 3 dimensions, that was a robust group. That was a group that was challenged, and not only didn't break down in the process, not only just was able to maintain the status quo and recover, but recovered and became stronger. 1 trip up the pegboard becomes 2 trips up the pegboard. Getting halfway up the climbing rope becomes getting all the way up the climbing rope to getting up and down the climbing rope several times. There is your anti-fragility. It's not just being resilient where you can withstand the external force. It is then getting stronger from it. That's what we need to get back to. And the foods we're eating is another hugely important component of this system. Food component has become just as complex as the exercise component. We have to have all these supplements. We have to have all of this energy drink and recovery drink and this and that, when at the end of the day, you have a well-rounded, solid diet and or eating real food, your supplementation needs are minimal. And the supplements that you do take, if you are eating properly, are going to really give you that benefit. Creatine works. However, if you eat like garbage and your workouts aren't great and you're not sleeping, then creatine doesn't work. And people will blame the creatine when it's really those other things. Those supplements are going to work for you, assuming you are doing things correctly. They are not enough to overcome the negativity or the negative aspects of a poor diet, poor exercise, not getting enough rest. So as we're getting to the end of the hourglass there, I think that's a good point to wrap up. We're going to add to this discussion as we go forward. I would love if everyone would check out my Substack, Coach Sal M's newsletter. You could search for Coach Sal M on X, at Sal Marinello. My email is coachsalm@proton.me. And on Patreon, I am Coach Sal M. If you want to go to Instagram, it's Coach Sal's Playmakers, and you'll see some of my training there. All right, we've run out of time, but remember, we want to get you to be not just resilient, but robust. I want you to remember we should be superior because of all the benefits of the knowledge and experiences of those who came before us have given us, but we aren't. But that information is there. So let's not be ignorant of it, and let's go back and look at what worked, and let's go back and look at what led us off the right path, and we're going to find a way to get us back. And you're doing the right thing already by being here and by exploring these things and adding them into your workout. All right, so we're going to add to this next week, but thanks for checking in, and I look forward, as always, to hearing from you. Later.